right?
Yes, and I want to pick up on something else that you said that I think is very important, this idea of going backwards, or the Dark Ages, if you will. And again, most of our audience, our wonderful audience, are teachers, and we all need a narrative that we have to sort of teach, an overarching narrative. And often we get it from textbooks, and often it goes like this. A bunch of elite white guys got together in a room, and they created these fabulous documents with great ideas. And then one by one, groups came up and proudly claimed their rights. Lower-class white men. Free blacks are always a problem there. But then we freed the slaves, and then finally women, as though these things were all crafted in stone. It was for them, and it was progressive.
Overnight.
Yes.
And it happened overnight.
And it happened, or it happened in a logical progression, a stately process. And it was always better and better. So everything was better and better in every way. And I think what's so interesting about studying disenfranchised people, since that's the title of our panel, is they show us how progress is not necessarily progressive, and that there are backlashes, and that there are these moments where somebody wants to put a genie back in a bottle, but it can't be done because these lower-class people and these black people and these women are so similar to people that they just keep going. They just want stuff. So I think that's one of the reasons we look at the disenfranchised, for that very reason.
Questions? Do you all have some questions you'd like to ask before we move on to some other aspects of this? Yes.
Besides teachers today, who would be unruly Americans?
I think we laugh.
The least ruly are nuns.
Oh.
Which is quite wonderful.
Other than Maria, I didn't know that. That's an interesting question. The one thing I'll say is something you already know, is the extent to which people feel like they have to paint themselves as the unruly ones. Whoever ran for president, I mean, maybe McCain will, but whoever ran for president as I'm the inside the beltway guy.
Oh no.
Actually McCain. Who has run to the extent that McCain has as the? I mean, even he's got his.
But he's not saying I'm inside the
bus.
beltway.
Right,
he's
yeah.
the maverick.
I'm the maverick. Yeah. So
the,
even McCain. Yeah. So everybody, it is a popular position. And I'm trying to think who's the last person. Maybe Cheney, was meant to offer that to the ticket of George Bush. But at the top of the ticket, who is the most recent person to run as? Yeah, I'm an insider. Maybe Walter Mondale. Look how he did.
But in the populace, wouldn't you say the blogosphere is the unruly Americans?
Yeah,
absolutely. There's this sense of taking it over ourselves, and taking on the power elites and all that. Yes, gentlemen.
YouTube. Just think about what YouTube is all about. There's all this stuff that's going out there. I got onto YouTube just recently just to observe. It's scary. No, seriously. I mean, those of us who have any impact in children's lives, be careful of what you let these kids get into, because it is very, very dangerous out there. And you talk about unruly. There are people that are throwing out all kinds of ideas, and I'm not trying to squash ideas, but you have to know the population you're dealing with. And when you're talking about the bonds of Abigail Adams doing this kind of surreptitiously, knowing how to
Actually, they did a lot of it.
You were
and that was covertly.
Yeah, but that was one of the. But I'll take your question. But that was one of the things I do want to talk about, is sort of how people did get around the rules. But go ahead.
Thank you. You mentioned textbook. Obviously, the topic was on women in the Constitution. If you look at the history of textbooks, you see how every once in a while they pop in a group that wants to be represented. One of the things that they did, I guess in the past 20 years, was all of a sudden women have a place in constitutional history. And they don't talk about it in the text. They just throw in Abigail Adams' letter, and that's it.
Or it's the little box.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
Right.
Well, I mean, this gets down to the fact that textbook writers should be taken out and shot, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is really,
You're an unruly American. Don't listen to this woman. Yeah, but it's a little pink box. It's a little pink box. Yeah. Yes.
Especially after what
Yeah.
you just said, my question is, how should we teach that time period, throwing in women? I almost think it's a disservice to say, yes, women were involved, because look, here's Abigail's letter.
Right.
and you just move on.
And do you know in that whole Adams series, which I had a lot of things I liked about it, although I was really obnoxious to watch it with,
I'll bet.
wrong, it didn't happen that way. Why'd they do that? And but you never heard in that whole series the words "Remember the Ladies."
Yeah,
it's
it was
just astonishing. Well, my answer would be to read Catherine's and my books. Because they really do deal with that period and with women as political influence. And, and what you all are in the wonderful position of being able to do is in the classroom putting those textbooks as much as possible aside and tell the stories, because that's what history is. History's gossip. And, and it's so much fun and it's so interesting and it's so appealing, but they manage to squeeze all the juices out of it in these books, and we just have to keep, rejuicing them.
And a lot of that material for writing the history, for instance, of women is on those unruly internets. That there are lots of horrible sites, but there's lots of, for instance, documents about enslaved women who fought in the Revolutionary War on the British side and got freed as a result of that. Some amazing stories of them. So, I think the Abigail letter is, as you tell it, and as others have told it, an amazing story. And of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. She was constantly talking about
But
that
also
issue.
his answer to her
right.
is appalling. And he laughed at her, and that was, you were making the point just now, Catherine, there were these moments, and then you see the reaction,
But then there's another moment, if I can follow up with that. And also, let me just give you bibliography, because I think you're right. You may have to do a little outside reading. But there are two books. They were actually published both in 1980, so they are making themselves into the mainstream narrative. And I'll just give you last names, but it's Norton, Mary Beth Norton, right. Liberty's Daughters, and Linda Kerber, Women of the Republic. And I do know what you're saying about the pink box for the girls and the blue box for people of color, and they're literally outside the text, because the text is... But these are, if you read those books, they'll give you a good lecture, too.
They will, but they're
Gunderson,
still tough
too.
for the kids.
It's still, but you have great stories and great quotes. I particularly like the women who complained during the Revolution. I enjoy the complainers. But I would say this to you. There's Abigail Adams' letter first, where she's talking about coverture and not the right to vote. She's talking about something more basic, more radical than the right to vote, which is the right to have a control over her destiny. So a lot of people misread that letter thinking she's like, votes for women. She's not. She's saying we need to not be so under your control. He laughs at her, but he gets worried enough to write to James Wilson and say, look, we have a problem. How are we really going to justify excluding men of little property and women? Where are we going to draw the line? And, of course, John Adams is a very logical, very verbose guy. So it's great to see him stumble through this letter. And finally he comes out with this. We cannot give women the right to vote because we just can't. It's too much.
Well, he's the same man who had said it was okay to teach his daughter Latin and Greek as long as her mother didn't tell anybody.
Right.
Yes. But he couldn't think his way through. So that's another moment where you see, he sort of laughs at her, he says dirty things to her, but then he's worried enough a few weeks later to say, look, this thing could get out of hand.
Right.
So.
Right. Other questions? Yes.
Well, I believe he also explains that if you gave women the right to vote, you'd have to give poor whites the right to vote too. So he's upholding also his own economic privilege by that.
Yes.
Because he's saying that economic dependency, whether it's a woman or a poor white, is similarly being corrupted politically.
Mm-hmm.
And she was very much against frequent elections. When democracy came along, or republicanism, she wasn't crazy about it either. I am interested in the ways people got around it, though. We talk about the women buying and selling property and all of that. And with Deborah Franklin, of course, Benjamin was in England and everybody knew it, and when she was signing his name. But the benevolent societies, the orphanages, these incredibly important institutions that were shaping the new nation. The women creating those had to form corporations in order to have the orphanage. Talk about that a little.